बहुत बार हमने ये डायलॉग सुना होगा, आई एम जस्ट अ गाय स्टैंडिंग इन फ्रंट ऑफ अ गर्ल आस्किंग हर टू लव हिम। एंड हम बहुत बार सोचते भी हैं कि इतना आसान क्यों नहीं हो सकता लव? Why can't it just be a person asking another person to love them? This is a question that you're frequently going to ask yourself in this show. Hi, I'm Pratiksha Mishra and you're listening to my review of Love Storiyaan. Dramatic Entertainment's latest Love Storiyaan essentially poses the question कि when two people are in love, what else do they have to deal with to kind of make this love successful? बहुत बार when you're watching the episode, you'll wonder, wow, it seems simple, but it's actually not. For instance, when Farda says of Suneet that, oh, he is just a boy, kind of questioning why his religion matters when they're both in love, or when Suneet later says कि I understand her and she understood me, शायद यही प्यार होता है. बरसों से हम ऐसी चीज़ें सुनते आ रहे हैं कि प्यार दोस्ती है, लव कॉन्कर्स ऑल, बट दिस अनदर थिंग दैट वी कीप हियरिंग इज दैट लव इज पॉलिटिकल. जब सोसाइटी डिसाइड करने लगे कि किसी की आइडेंटिटी डिसाइड करती है कि वो किससे प्यार कर सकते हैं या नहीं कर सकते हैं, देन लव डज बिकम पॉलिटिकल. इन लव स्टोरियाँ वी मीट अ लॉट ऑफ कपल्स लाइक दिस जिन्होंने डिसाइड कर लिया कि इट्स जस्ट तू और मैं अगेंस्ट द एंटायर वर्ल्ड बिकॉज ऑफ हाउ सोसाइटी फंक्शंस. This show, or every episode in this show, is inspired by stories that were featured in India Love Project. And Love Storiyaan works the best when this is happening, when we hear the real stories. जब जो couples हैं जिनकी story है directly कैमरा से बात कर रहे हैं या एक दूसरे से interact कर रहे हैं. Love Storiyaan का हर episode is directed by a different person, but उसका जो structure है almost similar ही है एक दूसरे से. And I do have a problem with the structure that I will get into. The structure is that we meet the real couples in the present time, obviously, because इस चीज़ के लिए time machine तो नहीं invent किया होगा. But what they talk about is how they met, how they fell in love, the problems that they faced to finally be in the happy space that they are in now, or the problems that they're still currently facing. ये जो स्टोरी है वो हर एपिसोड में या तो पुराने फोटोज, पुराने वीडियोस देख के बताई जाती है, या द कपल्स आर डायरेक्टली टॉकिंग टू द कैमरा, टॉकिंग टू पीपल अराउंड देम, और देयर चिल्ड्रन आर टॉकिंग टू अस, देयर फैमिली मेंबर्स आर टॉकिंग टू अस, और देयर आर ड्रामेटाइज्ड री-एनैक्टमेंट्स, या जिसको हम नाट्य रूपांतरण कहते हैं फॉर पीपल हु यूज्ड टू वॉच न्यूज आफ्टर मिडनाइट एज अ चाइल्ड. This is where the problem lies. These dramatic reenactments sometimes are a little too dramatic. Considering where or which production this show comes from, you do expect a bit of filminess to be there. और उसमें कोई problem नहीं है. To have some stage moments in a docu-series or a docudrama is absolutely fine. But problem तब आती है when these kind of try to overshadow the entire narrative. कहीं कहीं पे because these incidents are dramatized, थोड़ा सा वो artificial लगने लगता है. It starts to look more like an ad than an actual story. Like in modern love, it's completely fictionalized from real life stories. This is somewhere in the middle, and that middle ground doesn't always work. For instance, हार्दिक मेहता का जो story है इसमें, A Unsuitable Girl, follows a woman who is divorced and has 2 kids, if I'm remembering correctly, and she falls in love again. और story का main crux है एक ये, how she is kind of renegotiating with her identity as a woman and as a mother, and also how the man that she is in love with is trying to get her children to accept him, and all this happens through a dog that they bring home. Very cute story, absolutely adorable. One of the most sincere stories also in this anthology. But problem ये हो जाता है कि because of the dramatized reenactments, it just all becomes so unserious कि आप फिर वो जो story का depth है वो कहीं पे खो जाता है. कहीं कहीं पे this dramatization does work well क्योंकि one of my favorite moments in Love Storiyaan is actually a dramatic reenactment. In Akshay Indikar's Raah Sangharsh Ki, there is this love at first sight moment during a protest march, and just that moment is so beautifully staged that it is an example of how sometimes stage moments do work well in this documentary kind of format. Raah Sangharsh Ki is also one of my favorite stories in this anthology. It follows one Brahmin boy Rahul who is an IIT Kharagpur graduate जो decide करता है कि instead of following the path that everyone expects him to, he will instead work for tribal communities. वहाँ पे he meets a Dalit activist Subhadra. Again in this shot, the kind of dramatization and the staging takes away a lot from the episode itself क्योंकि सुभद्रा especially has such a great screen presence. और इनकी story में एक और चीज़ आपको देखने को मिलती है, which is another theme that makes Love Storiyaan great, is where the couples are just interacting with each other. There's a part where Rahul and Subhadra are laughing together because of a memory, and then Subhadra calls him out for the political correctness of the joke, and you see in that moment why they work together. ये compatibility आती कहाँ से है, and that is where you see how their love story has formed. Another story that I really liked in Love Storya was Shazia Iqbal's Homecoming, जिसमें हम मिलते हैं सुनीत और फरीदा से, who have also had a lot of hurdles of their own. They discuss how they both got into Dhaka University, how they then moved to India because उनके families नहीं मान रहे थे, and there's a lot happening there. I don't want to tell you the entire story because I think you'd much rather watch the show, but that is one of the stories to look out for क्योंकि वो एक ऐसा अनोखा पार्ट है इस एंथोलॉजी का वेयर द कैरेक्टर्स आर सो कैरिज्मेटिक, और उनको देख के ही रोना आ गया मुझे बिकॉज वाओ कपल गोल्स कि वो स्टेजिंग को ओवरशैडो कर लेते हैं. There's another thing that stood out to me in Homecoming in specific, that during a very emotional moment, Farida chooses to speak in Bengali. इस शो में बहुत हद तक सब लोग हिंदी में बात कर रहे हैं, I guess to make it more accessible to an audience, but again we see how the sincerity in this moment comes from also the people's cultural identity. और इस एपिसोड में एक ऐसी भी चीज़ है विच हैपन्स ऑफ कैमरा, विच इज़ एक्चुअली द मेन क्लोजर ऑफ द एपिसोड, एंड इट्स ग्रेट दैट इट हैपन्स ऑफ कैमरा. इट्स काइंड ऑफ दैट रियलाइजेशन दैट यू आर व्यूइंग दीज पीपल्स स्टोरीज बट यू स्टिल डोंट नो एवरीथिंग दैट गोज ऑन इन देयर लाइव्स. और वो जो एक डिस्कनेक्ट है इज़ वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट फॉर अ स्टोरी लाइक दिस बिकॉज you don't want real love stories to become reality TV. The shot I was most excited about in Love Storya was actually Archana Phadke's shot, Fastly, because I love her documentary about love. Just the way that documentary views human relationships, the intimacy and just the struggles is so beautiful. वो यहाँ पे इतना translate नहीं होता है. Fastly just seems like a cut-to-cut story put together. That's not a bad thing, it's just nothing special. But I do like that across the shots, I think this one is the best edited, so that's one thing going for it. Love Storya comes to a close with Colin Dikuna's story, which features Tista Das and Dipan Chakrabarti, a trans couple that got married in Kolkata. ये आपने न्यूज़ में देखा होगा. ये एक ऐसा shot है in Love Storya where you see truly how intrinsically individual and identity come together, and you're also wondering why these two people have to become such an example कि ये responsibility उनके कंधों पे क्यों आ जाती है. Sure, queer and trans kids watching this shot will feel so liberated क्योंकि trans people don't get a lot of empathy when it comes to content like films and TV, but still you're wondering why we live in a world where they had to make an example of their love and why it couldn't just be a simple love story. This shot, however, does have some of the most effective dramatic moments, especially the kind of montage जिससे ये story end होती है, truly brought tears to my eyes. Both of these people look so good on camera, just as a couple, just talking to each other, just interacting. And वही बात है Love Storya की is that it works so well when we just see an older couple still blushing because their partner is giving them a compliment, or just watching them recall memories that they clearly still hold so dear to their heart, or seeing how love has matured over the years and they're just completing each other's sentences. And this is basically it. We often say things like, oh, reality is stranger than fiction, and Love Storya एक ऐसा show है जिससे आपको realize होता है कि just love in the real world can often be braver, more resilient, and even so simplistically complex as compared to fiction. And you're wishing for a world where, sure, now we say that, oh, love doesn't have to be political, but you're truly wishing for a world where it genuinely doesn't have to be. And Love Storya, honestly, even though it is a little too flashy, a little too filmy, and kahin pe little flimsy as an entire package, just feels like stories of hope. And that is why my rating for Love Storya is 3.5 stars out of 5.